Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Altispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah Show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it is a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalai. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode. The Ask Noah Show kicks off this hour. And what a lot of us are working from home lately. And part of that is building out your home battle station or your remote work station. And as part of an ongoing desire of mine to try to introduce more physical activity into my life, so I'm making sure that I'm doing my part to combat heart disease, I have switched to a standing desk. And the desk that I chose was one made by a company called Vivo. Now, the thing about Vivo is I suspect, based on their website and the price of the product and all of that the truth is it's probably a less expensive desk. It's kind of a budget product. But I will tell you this. I have worked with some really high-end furniture companies. We typically at the office buy Steelcase and Herman Miller and those kinds of brands. So I'm familiar with what good quality desks and what to expect out of good quality chairs and stuff like that. And I have to tell you, I'm pretty impressed with this Vivo standing desk. It works great. I have had one now for a year and a half, and that I had at my house that I was just testing. We recently bought a couple of them for the office. So they don't break down. It supports multiple desk sizes, so you can choose which desktop or which desk surface you want to mount on it. It has a number of different memory positions, so you can choose, the sitting position, the standing position, then there's a third one. So if you share it with somebody else, something like that. And the motor is quick and stable and smooth. One of the things I was concerned about very early on when we started looking at some of these, more budget brand desks is the motor going to be jerky, and is it going to knock beverages over, knock monitors over? If we save $500 on buying a desk but trash a $1,200 monitor, we're not really ahead of the game. This is not a path to success. That's not the case. This is a very, very smooth system that they have, and so they've done a really excellent job. And so I'm really happy with this particular model. I will post the link in the show notes. And what you have to understand is when you go to purchase it, you're going to have to purchase two things separately. You're going to have to purchase the desk legs, that's the part that I'm talking about, and then you have to purchase a top. Now, you could just go buy a butcher block from your local hardware store. You could take a door, Jeff Bezos, that's how he started Amazon.com. You could just take a door and mount it to the desk. The nice thing about the Vivo frame is it doesn't care what you mount. They don't care which one you mount. I also found it fairly easy to transport. It breaks apart pretty quickly, and I can throw it in the back of my car and move the frame around. Obviously, transporting the actual desktop is a little bit more difficult. And finally, the polish that goes into this product. I was really impressed with the little remote head. Has two little screw holes, and you can simply mount that head wherever you like. So if you're a person that likes the controls on the left side of the desk, you can do that. If you go on the right side of the desk, you can do that. Also, 2-Bit in the chat room suggests the Jarvis desk frame. I'd be interested to see what the difference in price is. The Vivo standing desk frame is $300. Now, that does not include the top. You have to purchase a desktop. Now, you can purchase those. Amazon has a couple that were like $50, $60 that were just compressed wood. I went with some from IKEA that were a little bit better, or at least seemed like they were a little bit bigger, and they certainly were a little bit wider, which I liked. But the fact that you get input on that is, I really thought was pretty fantastic. And then little stuff, like putting a caddy for all of the cables and a small power splitter and stuff like that really goes above and beyond to show that this is a quality product. So the desk is Vivo, and it's a Vivo standing desk. I'll have a link for you in the show notes, but I've been very, very impressed with it so far. Just wanted to share that. Again, open phones this hour, 855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Brandon, in our in our Matrix chat says that he purchased the monoprice legs, and he said that they were pretty awesome. Hey, I want to invite Brandon and my friend Eric, the IT guy. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, Noah. How's it going?
Hey, good evening.
I'm glad that you guys were able to make the time to be here. So this is really exciting. Eric, you and I have been we've been friends and working on content together for the past few years in a variety of different aspects. A lot of people don't know, Eric, that you've helped out quite a bit behind the scenes, both with the JB crew and me personally. And so, a huge thank you to that. And Brandon, obviously, you've contributed content for us for our YouTube channel, as well as come on the show a couple of times. And so both of you are very valuable community resources. And recently, you guys have decided to start your own podcast. It's called The Pseudo Show. It's about system administration. You're going to combine the experience of a DevOps engineer and a guy who works at Red Hat and has touched every piece of technology under the sun. Literally the guy who brought you the video guide on how to set up Overt enterprise virtualization technology. This is a fantastic show. Tell me about it, guys.
So the Pseudo Show is going to be your place for all things enterprise open source. And we're going to cover topics from DevOps and Agile. We're going to cover open source cloud management. So it's going to take a systems administrator approach, but also kind of a new age development methodology approach. But then Brandon and I have also worked from home for a number of years, and so we're going to cover productivity tips, share some of our own stories. We've got a number of interviews lined up, so I'm really excited about it.
Brandon, what's your thoughts? How has it been kind of onboarding and getting set up with doing podcasting? This is your first attempt at that, yeah?
It is, and it's a lot of prep work, and juggling that with my day job has been a bit of a struggle, but I'm working through it.
When does the first episode drop, or has it already?
It dropped last Thursday.
And what is the first episode about? What did you guys cover?
So we covered just introductory to what is open source, what does enterprise open source even mean. Talked about some of the players, whether that's Red Hat or SUSE, and the business models in the space, and a variety of other topics in the first show. Nice little bite-sized podcast. We're keeping it to 20 to 30 minutes long.
And what do we have coming up on the next episode?
Funny you should ask. I think we called an audible today. Folks that think it's interesting to start a podcast should take the amount of work they think it's going to be and probably about triple it. Yeah. I think would be about right.
Yeah.
So we realized that the topic we had laid out for next week is a little bit more involved than we were expecting. So we might be shifting a little bit and might be taking a look at, we got some questions from the first show about how to get started with open source. We talked about contributing back, opening pull requests or submitting feature requests to open source projects. So we got a few questions around that, and having Brandon and I having both contributed, we felt like that was something we could address, and based on the feedback that we got, we feel like we should address, because we're trying to approach both the business as well as the community and kind of be a bridge between the two. And not to go down on too far of a rabbit trail, but we've noticed that some of the folks that come to the show from the DevOps business enterprise perspective I don't want to say they didn't know there was a community there, but didn't really understand how to get involved and how to get started. So I think episode 2 is going to be how do you get your foot in the door? How do you start getting involved with the community?
This is absolutely awesome. So the show is called The Pseudo Show. The first episode is live. It releases every
other Thursday.
It releases every other Thursday. Your host, Brandon. Now, Brandon, are you a permanent part of this thing? I never really got that.
I am.
All right.
Well, we'll see. We haven't had his first job yet.
Well, this is
I can say that here because he's my team lead during the day, and then we co-host the pseudo show together by night. So it's an entertaining dynamic. So I have to get my shots in while I can, because then when it's business hours, then I report to Brandon.
I love it. Hey, Brandon, Eric, seriously, congratulations, guys. This is absolutely fantastic. I invite everyone to go check it out. They can download it at
pseudo.show.
Pseudo.show. It's the Pseudo Show, system administration with your friends, Eric, the IT guy, and Brandon from Red Hat. Guys, anything else you want to leave people with? Nope. I guess not.
No, not really. If you listen to the show, go out and join us on Discourse. I guess I should plug the fact that the Pseudo Show actually launched with a lot of help from Destination Linux Network. I don't think we would have gone live yet, but a big shout out to the network, and really excited to be teaming up with folks like Noah and Michael. And Michael's been incredibly effective in helping us get things in place and allowed us to hit our launch date.
Good deal. The episode is the Pseudo Show. Guys, check it out. Thanks so much for taking the time to come on here and plug it. We appreciate it. We'll get you back on the program soon.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Noah.
855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Chaz calls from New York. Chaz, good evening.
Good evening, Noah. How's it going?
Hey, I'm doing all right.
Awesome. Well, this is sort of picking up from a topic we discussed a couple call-ins ago. I can't remember when exactly because time doesn't exist anymore. But if you remember correctly, my ThinkPad X260 died of undetermined causes a little while ago, and I've sort of been getting by with my ThinkPad 11e running Ubuntu. But I do eventually want to upgrade to something that, with a Celeron-based processor and a little more RAM. And I'm wondering if you could make a recommendation in the ThinkPad line, both for something that would be good with Ubuntu and, reasonable specs, as much as I would like to have the 32-gigabyte monster that Chris talked about on Linux Unplugged a little while ago. I think that's a little more than what I need.
What I would tell you is I would start with the X1 Carbon, and then I would work my way down from there. The X1 Carbon starts at a little over $1,000, and I have to tell you, Chaz, it has been the best laptop I've ever owned in my entire life, and I've owned a lot of them. First off, the BIOS or the UEFI interface literally has a configuration mode for Linux, and Lenovo now, of course, officially supports distributions of Linux, and the X1 Carbon is one of the models that is going to be hardware enabled. So I that would be my starting point. I think that is the best laptop you can buy today, particularly if you want something for Linux. Now, depending, I say starting there, right? Because there are certain features where you would stray one way or the other. So, for example, if wired Ethernet is important to you, or having the ability to have discrete graphics is important to you, then I would push you from the X series to the T series, and I would tell you to check out the T480, I think, is the current model. And the T480, again, it's going to start at $1,000. What you're trading a little bit of thickness on the laptop, because the X1 is just razor thin, and you're going to trade that for for a slightly thicker, a slightly larger version of the ThinkPad. But will allow you to have a little bit of extra space. It supports a second drive, I believe, and has that wired Ethernet jack on the side. And so, the X series is really, if you're going to be fast and portable, that's the way to go, particularly in my circumstance, right? I am most of the time using the X1 in combination with the Thunderbolt dock. And so from that perspective, it really doesn't matter how many USB ports or Ethernet ports, any of that stuff, because for the most part, I just need to charge it, and then I need to plug it into a dock. And so for me, the X1 has worked really well. But if you want that kind of experience where I feel like I have everything I need on the laptop itself, then I would go to a T series. And then, you can go, when you start getting into the workstation series, that's when they start getting crazy expensive and crazy powerful.
Right. What if I had accessories that I was able to salvage from the 260, like a stick of RAM or a hard drive. Is the X1 Carbon one of those ones where you're really kind of stuck with the configuration you get, or do I have the ability to swap things in and out if necessary?
So the RAM, I believe, is soldered, but like the SSD and the Wi-Fi card and all of those things are all, the backplate just comes off. So they didn't intentionally try to keep you from doing any of that, but just the way that the motherboard is manufactured, in order to get things that thin, they did solder the RAM in. So you have to order it with 16 gigs of RAM when it comes from the factory. And yes, Lenovo takes their pound of flesh for doing that. But that was really the only compromise I had to make. In fact, the first, it wasn't, I don't think it was a 6th gen one. I think it was the one I had before this. I ordered the lower resolution display and just swapped it myself. But after going through that process, it was kind of hairy, and I just went, yeah, I'll just order it with the HD display. So I have the 1080p display in mine, and I love it.
All right, well, that's good information, and hopefully I can find something that checks all the boxes. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. 855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Michael calls from Wisconsin. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi, Noah. Thanks for taking my call. N73 from a fellow ham. So I just had a question about network bridges. I have scoured every website that I can find about setting up a bridge for Virt Manager or Virsh on my server, and I cannot get the damn thing. Whether I use a static IP in the machine or DHCP, it will not get outside internet access. Just curious if you had any idea what else I could possibly check that would be blocking that from happening.
What's the host operating system?
So it's an Ubuntu server. Now, I do have a desktop on it, so it's using Network Manager, but I've tried Network D as well. I've done it through the GUI. I've done it through NMCLI. I've done it through, using NetPlan, the new thing on Ubuntu. For the life of me, I cannot get those virtual machines to get internet.
Let me ask you this. Have you tried...
IP address, and my router can see it.
Can you ping into the VMs from outside of the network?
Only from the host machine.
Only from the host. Okay, so it is a bridging issue. What are you using for, excuse me, you probably said so, but what are you using for the virtualization software?
So I'm using KVM. I threw a desktop on it just so I could use Virt Manager to see if I could, through the interface, do something differently.
Okay, so it's libvirtd underneath.
Right.
Inside of Virt Manager, does Virt Manager obviously it connects to the host system because it's running on the host system, so I assume that connects no problem, right?
Yep.
Have you tried creating the bridge inside of Virt Manager?
I did not. Well, I shouldn't say that. So I did try it before. I had even less luck with that. I couldn't ping it, and I couldn't see it on my router. Now, when I set a static IP, doing a bridge through either Network Manager or Network D, and setting a static IP in the virtual machine, I can see it on my router. So that's as far as I've really gotten, but I cannot get it.
Well, hold on. You back up. Hold on. So you can see some of the VMs in your router. Is that what you said, or you can see the host in your router?
If I set a static IP, I can see it in my router. I just can't reach out to the internet from it, and I can't reach out to the rest of my network either.
Okay. Yeah, if you set a static IP in one of the VMs. Inside of one of the VMs, you can see that machine from outside of the virtual host. You can see that on your router. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. So the issue is this. The issue is with the default gateway. The issue is with routing the other direction. I suspect it's the default gateway. What kind of bridge are you looking to set up? Are you looking for your VMs to just get IP addresses as if they were computers that were just plugged into your network?
Just one of them. So I've got quite a few that I'm using, what's the internal network that it creates, the default one that it creates. Mm-hmm. But specifically for Home Assistant, I'm trying to create a Home Assistant virtual machine, or I have. So I went so far as I just bought a NIC, and I did a PCI pass-through and assigned the NIC to it right now because I couldn't figure this out. But really, I wanted, that machine to be accessible on the rest of my network so that my wife can access Home Assistant from her phone.
What I would tell you to do is this: is Is nuking and paving from scratch a possibility, or are you too far into with configuration to try and start over?
No, absolutely. I use Ansible and mostly Docker containers, so I can get it back up and running within an hour or two, and I have done that already. Okay, because just from a troubleshooting perspective, it's just going to be a lot easier if you're starting from fresh than if you're trying to figure out if there's a problem, if we're troubleshooting an old problem, or if there's something new. So here's what I would do. I would reset up I would do a fresh install. I would install I would install libvirtd, and if you want to install Virt Manager on there, that's great too. Then I would open Virt Manager before I do anything else, except maybe set a static IP address on the server. I would open up Virt Manager, and I would click into the server, and I would go over to the Networks tab, and I would create a new a bridge from there. And what that's going to do is a couple things. First of all, we're following a process that I've done many times, and so I know that it works. The second thing that you'll do is you'll let Virt Manager make the configuration changes and set up the bridge for you, so that those VMs can talk out. So I would check two things then after you get done with that. The first thing I would check is to see if you not only can you ping out to Google.com or whatever, but are you able to reach a IP address? If you just can't resolve the name, it may be a DNS issue. If you can't reach the domain and you can't reach an IP address, then you do have a bridging or routing issue. And I suspect, as I say, just creating the bridge from Virt Manager will fix that. I will tell you that I have seen in CentOS, I've not played with it in Ubuntu, but I've seen a couple of times in CentOS where when the bridge is first set up, something goofs with DNS, and you have to go back into resolve.conf and edit that, or go back into the bridge config and specify DNS1, DNS2. So that's where I would start with that. Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, and I have done it. I nuke and pave once, and I did do resolve conf, and I did try CentOS, but yeah, I'll do it again. I have not tried setting it up from Virt Manager, so I appreciate that. Okay, yeah, you bet. Thanks for the call. Chris, Canada, I got about a minute. Go straight to your question, please.
Okay, I have a Dell Alienware laptop that I inherited from my brother-in-law. Got it fixed up, threw in a 2 terabyte SSD in there, and put Ubuntu Mate on it, and when it boots, it actually just goes straight to a minimal grub prompt. And when I try to, when I spam F12 to pick a boot partition, it just works then, but just automatic boot.
Are you installing with UEFI or BIOS?
UEFI.
That's very and the UEFI is set to boot off of UEFI too?
Yes.
Only time I've ever seen that happen, and this obviously is a fresh install.
This was. Well, it was a fresh install of 1910 first, and it was doing the same thing, and it continued on even though I've done the release upgrade to 2004.
Here's what I would suggest. I would suggest, and I'm sorry I don't have a lot of time to cover this hour, but what I would do is this, Chris. Try and go to Dell's website and see if there is a BIOS or a UEFI update for that machine. Apply that and see if that fixes your problem. I will tell you, I have seen that happen a number of different times, but every time it's the same answer, and that is that something is not set up right for it to boot. The install is UEFI, but the computer isn't set up to see UEFI, or the partition isn't flagged right, or something like that happens, and then the machine won't boot, and it just hits that grub prompt and then stops. So I would try updating the firmware, see if that works. If it doesn't, give me a call back and I will help you.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate the call. 855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Dr. Andy Yen is back with us from ProtonMail. I wanted to get him back on so we could discuss some of the latest things that ProtonMail is doing, as well as the ProtonMail blog. And they are doing a fantastic job of covering issues of privacy and security and bringing that information into the center spotlight so that everybody can take advantage of that. Dr. Andy Yen, welcome back to the program.
Hi, yes. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here today.
We appreciate you taking the time. So I guess let's start with this. You guys have been working on the Open PGP test suite. Why is that interoperability important to privacy and security, and what is ProtonMail doing to support the development of it?
Well, I think one of the issues that we have today with a bot applications in the privacy space is that they're essentially walled gardens, right? Everybody needs to be on that platform in order for it to work, and that in some ways also limits the potential reach of these platforms. And if we look at communication tools, email is actually by far the most common and actually most successful communication tool that's ever been devised in human history. And the reason that it works so well is because it's federated. Anybody that can run a server can get onto email. And PGP, it gets a lot of flack for being dated sometimes, for not maybe being as modern as it could be. Has the benefit of being able to leverage the email infrastructure that exists today and being able to reach a very, very broad audience. So our view is that by developing PGP further, by modernizing the standard and transitioning it to something that really doesn't really resemble the PGP of the 90s anymore, we're helping to bring encryption to a much bigger audience by leveraging the fact that email is federated. And that's something that I think is very, very important, especially if we want to be able to take private technology to the mainstream.
In recent news, we've seen a lot about protests and the privacy implications that come with these protests. I noticed ProtonMail is taking a very firm stance on this. How are these protests that are protesting the excessive force by police? How are they being used to invade people's privacy? And how can products like Proton VPN help people to prevent their privacy from being violated?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the protests, because there are so many protests going on today in the world, right? On one side of the spectrum, we have the protests in Hong Kong, which is fighting against state surveillance and the erosion of democratic rights in Hong Kong by the Chinese government. Then we also have protests, in the U.S. centered on racial equality and also the idea of trying to combat some of the abuses of police. And even though these two protests are in completely different parts of the world, they actually share the common theme. And the common theme is, how do we protect people, whether it's black people, white people, any people in general, citizens of the world, how do we protect citizens against police overreach, police abuse, which is in some sense, state abuse, right? This is essentially, governments overreaching the power that, we as citizens have have in fact granted them, right? And government is for the people, by the people, right? And it also shows kind of the danger of technology, right? In Hong Kong, state surveillance, control over the internet, as is done in China, gives the government enormous power and leverage over the citizens. Similarly, here in the U.S., there's more laws and regulations, of course, in the U.S., but at the same time, police have ability to subpoena providers for information. Police have abilities now to deploy facial recognition on a very, very large scale. And in the digital world, like it or not, we become easier to trace. And through the companies like Google and Facebook with mass amounts of information, which is all subject to subpoena, and warrants, in fact, it's not very, very hard for government to overreach in these situations, even in democratic societies like the U.S. So I think what Proton VPN and what ProtonMail does is by ensuring and guaranteeing people's right to privacy online, it's really in some sense also protecting freedom of speech, freedom of protest, which in many ways is the cornerstone of our democracy. And I believe the protests, these are two very separate protests in completely different parts of the world, but they show really that the idea of protecting privacy, this is something that is of universal importance. It's applicable to all people, no matter where you live, and it's something that truly everybody needs to care about.
Let's dig into that a little bit further. How are governments using private companies to roll out bulk data collection? And what is ProtonMail's response to legitimate legal information requests under Swiss law? I ask because, we have seen some progress in a post-Snowden world in where the NSA is no longer allowed, officially anyway, to do bulk collection on American citizens, but we know that they have now turned to corporate entities to accomplish the same goal. So how is that working out, and what is ProtonMail's response and part in all of that?
We actually published a study quite recently on our blog where we actually looked into this, right? And because of Freedom of Information Act and other ways, you can in fact get information about government requests and how government has shifted to leveraging big tech companies. And what we've seen is, since the last couple of years, the number of government requests to the big tech companies has increased by around 500%. So it's gone up by a factor of 5. And that, to most people, really should be scary because the amount of information that Google or Facebook has on a normal citizen is way more than what the NSA ever could have collected, right? And it shows that there is an active effort by states to begin leveraging and getting access to this treasure trove of data. And that, in a nutshell, is the problem of data in the first place, right? If your business model, like Google or Facebook, is built around collecting as much data as possible and invading privacy, as far as you can get away with, then you create this data that can be misused in some frankly pretty appalling ways, right? And at Proton, our philosophy with ProtonMail and Proton VPN is different, right? Our philosophy is actually to collect as little information as possible because the only way to protect information at the end of the day actually is to not have it at all, right? We don't need to track users actually to provide email services. We don't track users. We don't monitor, what people are doing. And we create an ecosystem, through both our policies, but also our encryption, such that if we were to, get served with a subpoena, there's actually very little that we can disclose because we don't collect information in the first place. Now, on the other side, of course, there are some cases, some situations where there is a legitimate, law enforcement need for data, right? We all know that there's cybercrime, the cybercrime, that there's hackers and there's people that abuse, the internet for bad purposes. And in those cases, we are, of course, willing to cooperate with law enforcement. We're willing to assist. We're willing to help investigators look deeper into these accounts. But our default position is that we assume users are innocent unless proven guilty, right? And we will only assist in cases when there's a very, very strong probable cause that's backed up by a court order. And this is very, very different from Google and Facebook's approach, where they basically collect everybody's data, whether or not they're under suspicion or not. And they do that because it's part of their business model. And that's kind of the difference between targeted surveillance and mass surveillance, right? Targeted surveillance sometimes does have a legitimate purpose, but it's the mass surveillance. It's doing it on a mass scale against largely innocent citizens. That's what we're strongly opposed to, and that's what we believe is a threat to democracy.
So to be clear, you don't see this, you don't see in end-to-end encryption, and you don't see the privacy tools that you create as a shroud for illegal activity. In fact, if people violate Swiss law, ProtonMail will respond.
Well, it is sometimes a shroud for illegal activity, right? You definitely can leverage the fact that we're end-to-end encrypted to conduct some things that are illegal. But you know what? People can also leverage airplanes for terrorist attacks, right? People can also leverage trucks for terrorist attacks. People can also, terrorists also use sidewalks, right? They use guns, they use, bulletproof vests, all these things, right? So we need to look at this from a bigger picture. There's no absolutes in the world, right? You cannot say this technology is absolutely used for good, this is absolutely used for bad. Tools can be used for good or for bad. And just like you wouldn't ban airplanes because of 9/11, you also wouldn't ban privacy because a few people, are misusing it for bad purposes. So the way that we need to look at this is the overall value to society, right? If we lived in a world with zero privacy protections, complete surveillance, and total control, I would bet you that in that world, it would have lower crime than the world that we live in today. But is that the society that we really want, right? Are we willing to accept all the downsides that come with that in order to, get to zero crime, right? And by and large, I think most people would say no, because the downsides, losing freedom of speech, losing democracy, losing the ability to, control government and hold them to account. These are all very serious things to give up. So if you look at it holistically from a big picture standpoint, in fact, the values that privacy, democracy, and freedom, the values that we get from this are well in excess to some of the potential downsides, and that's what makes it worth protecting.
What are your views on biometric authentication, particularly on mobile devices? Are they secure? Should people be using them? And can people be legally required to unlock their phones? What do people need to know?
Well, that's kind of like asking me, if a password is secure, right? In general, they're not really secure. And the reason it's not so secure is, if I lose my password or someone steals my password, I can always change my password. But I can't really change my fingerprint, right? So I'm essentially using a key, which is something that I cannot replace or change. And I'm leaving a copy everywhere I go on everything I touch, right? So when you think about it that way, biometrics, really are kind of a core way of securing things. So I understand the convenience of it. There are some use cases where it's useful, but I don't really believe that biometrics today are ready to replace traditional passwords, right? Just because of the inherent flaws of fingerprints, right? It's your fingerprints are everywhere. That's not really secure, and you can't change it if it gets breached. So I think that's a problem. And of course, you also right now, the current law, the way it's set up, is at the border, for example, if your phone is secured by biometrics, you can be forced to use your fingerprints to unlock it, because it is actually acceptable to ask for your fingerprint when entering a country, right? But current laws don't force you to divulge information that's only in your head. So in that sense, when it comes to being forced to unlock something, a password is also more secure than a fingerprint.
Digging a little further into pins and passwords, how long should a pin be? How long should a password be on a mobile device to feel that the device is safe or secure? Do you have any recommendations for people?
This is a very deep and complicated topic. First of all, right, obviously the longer the password is, the more entropy it has, the stronger it is, right? But if it's so long that you can't remember it, that also sort of defeats the purpose. Typically myself, I try to keep things between 12 and 16 characters, but more importantly, I try to use passphrases instead of passwords, just because those are A, easier to remember, but B, also have equivalent entropy or sometimes even more entropy.
Do you have any recommendations for instant messaging? Obviously, SMS text messaging has become very popular and is a way for people to stay in communication. But as we're learning, and as we saw in the state of Minnesota, police are now using contact tracing, and they are starting to work with the cell phone companies to track people and track people's location and track the contents of the message, because of course SMS is not encrypted. Is there anything out there that can help people with that?
Yeah, I would say the gold standard today, when it comes to instant messaging, is probably still Signal, right? Signal, of course, is not perfect, and has certain downsides as well. But as far as what's out there today, it's really Signal, kind of taking maybe the top spot, and maybe tied with Signal is also Wire. That's a bit kind of lesser known, but it's also something that people are using. So those are the two that I generally would recommend.
Talk a little bit about app key protection system and how does that work with ProtonMail?
So that's actually a system that we developed specifically for iOS. And the reason we developed the app key protection system on iOS is we often have situations where malware gets installed on people's devices, right? And generally speaking, encryption doesn't really help you if your device is compromised. If they can log every single keystroke that you're typing, it doesn't matter that we encrypt or not, right? People get what you're typing. And one thing that we noticed was, in fact, a common attack vector against end-to-end encrypted services like ProtonMail is actually to attempting to compromise people's devices. And we first noticed this among a subset of our users, which is in fact dissidents who are from the Tibetan community. So they obviously are engaged in cyber warfare, largely with the Chinese government. The Chinese government is trying to identify them, capture them, put them in prison, etc. Right? Terrible things happen as a result of this. And many of these people actually are Proton users. And we actually solved about a year and a half ago a very specialized targeted malware, which was attempting to compromise iOS devices owned by Tibetan dissidents. And then this malware would essentially try to extract the local data from the ProtonMail app. So the app key protection system was something to further secure and encrypt the data that's stored locally on iOS devices, so that even if they were compromised on the device through some other means, maybe clicking a bad link, or maybe through some iOS compromise or some 0-day, there'd be an additional layer of protection that would make it harder for their ProtonMail data to be stolen off the device.
I'd like to ask you a little bit about Apple versus Android, if I can, from a security and privacy standpoint. Obviously, with the work that you do at ProtonMail, you are researching and paying attention to the trends and the platforms, obviously, that ProtonMail runs on. So, from your security experience, what is the better platform from a security and privacy standpoint, or are they the same, Android or iOS?
There's a pros and cons of both, right? And I would say, on the surface, right, from what we know, from what we can see, and kind of, from public information out there, it's believed that both companies, Apple and Google, do put a pretty big emphasis, on security. Obviously, Apple has a, stronger emphasis on privacy, because Google, as much as they try to convince people, it's not a privacy company, will never be a privacy company, and will never have user privacy, at heart, right? It's just fundamentally against their business model. But from a security standpoint, they both, have an interest in, probably doing the right thing. Now, really though, it comes down with all software actually to a matter of trust and really a trust in people, right? Whether or not Apple or Android is secure, we can never really know for sure. The best kind of proxy we have for this is, can we trust the companies, behind that to really put, user security in the first place, and is that something that they strongly care about? And in this regard, because of kind of Google's business model and the way Google tries to test the limits of what is acceptable when it comes to breaching user privacy, I would tend to trust Apple a little bit more. But even then, I still remain skeptical, right? I don't fully trust either one of them, and that of course is why even on Apple we have our app key protection system.
Is there a third-party operating system? Is there, the Copperhead OSs of the world back when they were around, and obviously a bunch of the Android spin-offs, or Sailfish OS or UbiPorts? Have you seen any third-party mobile operating system that you say that is by far the best operating system for a mobile experience if you're looking from a security and privacy standpoint?
I actually think it's a massive problem today that, if you look at all the mobile ecosystem, there's really only two players, right? It's essentially a monopoly, right? With Apple and Google, and I think that's a massive problem for competition. It's a massive problem actually for at the end of the day, user experience, costs. It's not correct, right? We need to have more choices on the marketplace. We need to have more competition. But at the same time, if we think about it, we can see why there isn't more competition in this space, because the barriers to entry, the amount of time, effort, resources, and money that you need to invest to build a competing system is just so high and so massive, right? So I like the fact that there's some efforts, forking Android and trying to do things in a more security and privacy focused way, but in fact, these things are expensive, right? And unless you have the backing of a massive company with huge amounts of revenue, it's going to be tough to develop these alternative platforms at the same speed and at the same level of user experience that, say, the latest Android or iOS could offer. So it's something that I personally would like to see changed. It's something that maybe as Proton gets bigger and bigger and is able to have more influence in this space, that we can assist in helping to change. But really today, it is a monopoly with two players. And that's just the reality of it today.
I think a lot of that comes in because of the app infrastructure. If you want applications, those are the two platforms you can get them on. And I think that drives a lot of user adoption. And of course, The fact that their devices are pre-installed and sold in stores, of course, go a long way to that. But you guys are attacking this on a different front in that you are replacing the Google Suite with privacy-aware alternatives. What is the status of projects like Proton Calendar, and can it be tied to other services without sacrificing privacy? You know, from the Google infrastructure, I think when people are looking at calendar suites, they say to themselves, it's great because I can publish my calendar online, or I can have invitation requests come into the calendar. Does Proton Calendar, work with any of those things? And if so, what is the status of it?
Well, it's currently actually in beta. So on the web version, you can actually already go online and use Proton Calendar, and there's actually a lot of people already using it in beta. We're also working, of course, on the mobile versions. So we hope by the end of this year to be able to release on all platforms out of beta, to a broader general audience. And it's tricky, right? Google has obviously spent over a decade and probably tens of billions of dollars to build G Suite, right? And we're attempting to do the same thing, but we have a kind of a late start and fewer resources, right? But at the same time, we also see very strong demand and support for more privacy and more security online. So we're not going to catch up and hit feature parity on day one, but as time goes on, especially with Calendar and other products, even just within Calendar in beta in the past 6 months, we've added a lot of features, right? And at the end of the day, I've never met anybody that tells me, I don't want more security and more privacy, right? It's something that everybody wants. It's part of being human, actually. And our goal really is to be able to deliver that with as few trade-offs as possible. And it will not happen overnight. But gradually, as we continue developing, adding features and refining, the Proton suite of products, I do think that we will really be able to eliminate most of these trade-offs, most of these, barriers to entry. And we've been doing that on Mail. We've started doing that now on Calendar. It's a long journey, but of course we're committed to doing this because I think it's quite important, for the future of the internet and really for building a better world, actually.
In addition to Proton Calendar, one of the products that I've been keeping a very close eye on because I'm so excited about it is ProtonDrive. Now, I understand there are a number of technical challenges in developing ProtonDrive, but what is the status of that, and what are some of the technical challenges that you're coming across to create a truly private cloud-based drive?
Yeah, so that's also in development. Internally, we've already started an alpha within the company, so we're testing it internally now. And I would say that effort is probably between 6 and 9 months behind the Calendar effort, right? So, hopefully within a year after Calendar has its public global release, we'll be able to do the same with ProtonDrive. So in some sense, those two projects really are sort of moving in parallel. The difficulty really when it comes to ProtonDrive are probably twofold, right? One, it requires a lot of low-level engineering because anything that is dealing with files and file storage requires integrating with the operating system at a very deep level, at a very low level, and doing this on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android on all platforms, and also web is quite tricky, right? And when it comes to very large files and you want to do that, there's also an overhead for encryption, so you have to make it fast and performant. So that's one part of the challenge. The other part of the challenge is, I would say, unlike a lot of other companies that are around these days, our solution to infrastructure isn't to buy Google Cloud, Microsoft Cloud, or Amazon Cloud services, right? That's not that's not how we want to do it because it's not good for privacy, it's not good for security, and it's very, very important to be able to host our infrastructure in our own data centers. But that takes time, right? Buying the hardware, getting the financing for that, building out the data centers, building out the network and the software required to run these massive server farms to store all the data is quite intensive. So in fact, a lot of our efforts in the past year and a half working on ProtonDrive have really been focused also on building out the infrastructure. And this is not virtual infrastructure, right? This is actual servers that we buy, that we install, that people are in there doing this by hand, right? And that, of course, limits the speed at which we can move. But I think it's important to make that investment now because as you scale and get bigger and bigger, it becomes harder and harder to switch to running your own infrastructure later on. So it of course puts our release schedules back probably by a year longer than it would be if we had gone straight to one of the public clouds. But in the long run, it delivers, I think, a better user experience and a better security and privacy for the end user. And for us, it's not really about doing things fast or doing things cheaply. It's about doing things right. And we prefer to take the extra time to make sure that we do this in the best possible way.
Talk a little bit about what alternative routing is and how ProtonMail is using that to help anti-censorship measures.
This is the one topic that I don't like to talk too much about, precisely because I don't want to give our adversaries, say, in the Russian government, a step-by-step guide of how to, block Proton, right? But I can, of course, explain the rationale. Back earlier this year, we were actually blocked in Russia. It's actually completely, unjustified block. I think it's for political reasons and also because a lot of the governments, people that don't like the government, they don't like the government in Russia are probably using Proton, right? So it's a difficult situation, but also not unexpected. We're also blocked in China for the same reason, and I think there will be more countries in the future which are not very open to freedom, who will want to block services like Proton, which give digital freedom to citizens, right? And the motivation to do alternative routing and to build infrastructure around this was really to make it much harder for our applications and our software to be blocked. So today, even though we're blocked in Russia, if you use a lot of the apps, in fact, it still works, right? And I can't go into too much technical details of how it works. Of course, people can probably reverse engineer it if they want to look at it, because a lot of the code is open source. But we use a variety of methods to try to bypass the most common ways of state censorship, and it's been effective. It's come in quite handy in a number of occasions, and doesn't always work, but it's better than nothing. And I think it's important that we continue to build technologies in this direction, because the way that you promote freedom online. And the way that you support your user communities is actually through tech, right? And if you do it right, you can actually make it quite difficult to block your app.
Andy, before we let you go, is there anything else that is happening at ProtonMail, Proton the company, that people should be aware of?
I think these are pretty tough times that we're in economically, right? A lot of people have lost their jobs. And we're very fortunate to be one of the companies out there that is still hiring. We were able to grow even during the shutdown. I think because we offer secure communications more or less, right? And this is something that the world always needs. And so we're really taking advantage of this opportunity to try to grow the team, get more people on board, and build the features and products faster. Because I know a lot of people out there, yourself included, are really eager to see these things come to market. So if there's any listeners out there who are passionate about internet freedom, privacy, really building an internet ecosystem that puts users first and ahead of profits, then we're looking to hire, right? So, if you've been out of a job and you've been impacted by the whole COVID situations, come to our site, check out our career page, and apply. We're really here to serve people. The way that we ensure that is by having people with this type of mentality come and join us. So we definitely are looking to expand our team over the summer, and we hope to hire some great talent in the coming months.
His name is Andy Yen. He is the founder of ProtonMail, the website protonmail.com, secure email based in Switzerland. Check them out. Check out the end-to-end encryption, the anonymous email. You're backed by Swiss privacy. It's easy to use. All of the apps, at least the customer-facing ones, are all open source. A modern inbox design. It's what we use to take your feedback at live@asknoahshow.com. And we appreciate Dr. Andy, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on the program. We'll get you back real soon.
Yes, thanks again.
Again, open phones, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. I'm telling you, I feel sometimes like that guy has forgotten more about security and privacy than I'll learn if I live to be 100 years old. Absolutely fantastic to speak with Dr. Andy Yen. Hey, just a couple minutes left in the hour. We'll try and get to a piece of feedback here. Mario writes in and says, "Hey, I just stumbled onto your show not that long ago and just wanted to say how pleased I am at listening to you speak on your show. I totally understand your approach to security and your views on privacy, especially with home IoT. Anyway, I just finished listening to episode 186, Matrix Madness, and thought it was neat to hear how a piece of open source software can have so much of a positive effect on how we're able to communicate, especially during these hard times. It's kind of hit home for me, and just recently deployed a couple of public and private Jitsi servers in order for our company and customers to be able to communicate effectively. I'm a huge proponent of open source and Linux in general, and try to use it where applicable. Anyway, just wanted to mention that I'm a new listener and enjoying your show. Keep up the great work. Keep on spreading the tech news and views. Mario." Hey, Mario, thanks. I really appreciate you dropping the kind word. A huge thanks to JT, our executive producer, Sarah, our call screener. If you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter at Colonel Linux. Of course, you can follow the show at Ask Noah Show. That's how you'll stay up to date, find out when episodes are postponed, or every once in a while we have to cancel. We'll be live next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central, streamed at AskNoahShow.com. This hour the show's over, but you can check out the show notes for all of the articles and references you heard during the episode, as well as a complete catalog of back episodes by going to AskNoahShow.com. We'll see you next Tuesday.